This is Eva Lerner-Lam, and it's Sunday, May 29. It is 3:34 in the afternoon in the United States, Eastern Time, and it is 9:30 in the evening in Central Europe. And this is the Violin Conversations in the Living Room. I'm actually in the living room, and it's number 27. I started this earlier, I guess it was actually last year. These are very informal conversations that are modeled after the conversations that my parents had in this living room with violinists, violin makers, dealers, academics, performers, collectors. And as the eldest of four of their children, I learned a lot listening in on those conversations. And I saw the value to simply keeping in touch with people, not to make a deal, not to try to do anything in a business sense, or to do anything else except just enjoy and learn. And so I logged on to my Facebook account this morning, and I saw that Flavia had posted a short sentence about how she just finished publishing a new novel. And so we got into a conversation on Facebook, and I asked her whether she would mind joining me today. Gave her no notice at all, three hours notice maybe, for her to get her thoughts together. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to have a conversation with Flavia, who I just met about 9 minutes ago, and get to know her a little bit. And we're recording this so that a lot more people can get to know Flavia and get to know about her book and what her motivations were writing the book and what inspired her. I'm looking forward to reading the book and maybe getting together again in a few weeks to talk about my impressions about it. And hopefully those of you who are taking the time to listen to this recording will also feel motivated to buy a copy of her book and read it and join us for a book club conversation. You were just telling me a few minutes ago that you are actually not a full-time author. You're actually going to be getting a degree in sustainability.
I have a professional master in management of sustainable development. In July, I'm going to receive my master degree in management and finance. But I also have a Bachelor of Arts in Literature and Heritage, so I both love finance and literature and culture. And thank you very much for this amazing opportunity. I feel so lucky of being here virtually in your living room.
Thank you. I'm delighted to meet you. It's just fascinating to me. I'm actually a civil engineer, but I spend a lot of time in the classical music world as well as 5G and electric vehicles, electric trucks and buses, things like that. I think it's a left brain, right brain thing. I think it keeps us a little healthier.
Yeah. Yes, so I'm not a full-time author. This is my first novel. And yes, the fact is that I was born in Cremona. And and Cremona is the city where Stradivarius was born, and Amati, and so there is a rich culture in violin making, and I met many violin makers during my life. And after my Bachelor of Arts in Literature and Heritage, I just wanted to write a novel. That was my objective. I decided to find the story of a violin maker, and I found casually the story of Giuseppe Rocca. He was born in the 19th century and died 4 years after the unification of Italy. So Yes, he died in 1865, while the unification of Italy was in 1861. And so his story was rich of events because he moved among 4 cities in the north of Italy, in Piedmont. I could make a sort of match between his life and the story of Italy.
Ah, I see.
And so I thought that all these events, all these facts about his life were perfect for a novel.
How true to the history, the actual story is the novel, or did you take a lot of liberty?
I studied his biography. Know more about the life of Giuseppe Rocca because many people studied and there are already books about his life, but we don't know anything about the wives of Giuseppe. So
you could take off a little bit and be a little bit more free to write.
Yes, exactly.
So can you tell us first a little bit about the plot, the general arc of the story that you tell? No spoilers, okay? If there's a terrific climactic ending, please save that. But just sort of the general arc of the story. You've already hinted at it, but maybe a little bit more detail about where the story goes. And if you wouldn't mind, would you also tie it to any specific things related to Cremona? Was he based in Cremona?
No, he was not based in Cremona. I prepared a presentation. If you don't mind, I can share it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, yes, please go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, just a moment. Can you see it?
Yes,
Okay, it's a very short presentation. Okay, so the book, the novel is called Morte di un liutaio, that is in Italian. The book is available only in Italian at the moment. So the translation is Death of a Violin Maker, or luthier. And Le vicende di Giuseppe Rocca means the vicissitudes of Giuseppe Rocca. And yes, you asked me something about Cremona. So I was born in Cremona, that is here in the north of Italy. It's a nice city. It's a small town, but it is home for almost 200 violin makers from all over the world. And I just wanted to highlight that traditional violin craftsmanship in Cremona was described in 2012 in UNESCO's list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And so I was inspired by this environment, this cultural environment. And more data about Giuseppe Rocca. So he was born in Barbaresco in 1807. So I mean, like here, and he was born here in this part of Italy, northwest of Italy, and died in Genoa in 1865, 4 years after the unification of Italy, that was in 1861. He lived in 4 cities, Barbaresco, Alba, Turin, and Genoa. He learned the art of violin making in Turin by another very important violin maker, whose name is Pressenda. And then he went through financial difficulties, diseases, alcoholism too, and 5 weddings. And his corpse was found in a well owned by a marquis. And the hands of the watch stopped at 2:45 in the night. And the police said that it was an accident, but his son Enrico did not believe this version. So, and what else? Yes, and here is just a slide about the story of my book, because it's also nice to mention that I published this book thanks to a crowdfunding campaign. The publishing house is an Italian one that publishes books that successfully pass a crowdfunding campaign. And so after reaching the goal of 200 copies, I could publish my book, and now my book is distributed in the physical Italian bookshops, but also online, like Amazon and other online shops. And so this is a successful story from a point of view, but also a nice story for other people who want to publish a book and maybe they do not know how to do it. Maybe they do not have money to publish the book, but they can successfully publish it via a crowdfunding campaign. And yes, and the book was published 2 months ago in March 2022. It's available only in Italian, unfortunately, but I would like to also to translate it in other languages, English, of course, to make it available for violinists and other string instruments passionates who can't read it in Italian. And who knows? Let's see what happens. This is, I think, the first opportunity to talk about my book in English with a person outside the borders of Italy. So
wonderful. I really think that takes a lot of courage to do this, and in addition to the hard work. And these days, I think it's equally difficult for a musician to find a way to record a performance and distribute that performance, as it is for an author to publish and distribute a work. And there are many new avenues for doing this, and I'm so glad to see that you are using social media. That is how the two of us got to know each other. You joined my Facebook living room conversations and told us about the book that you published. Avi and I have some similarities in our background, even though we only met about 19 minutes ago, because we both have our right brain over in the engineering, business, management side of things, and then on the left brain, we're interested in music and the arts and writing
and so on.
So it was such a spontaneous invitation to Flavia to join this call. I typically try to have a violin conversation in the living room, my parents' living room, which I'm actually here. It's not a
piano.
It's not a background. I'm actually
in
here.
The background,
But my parents, who were Chinese immigrants to this country, were escaping China in 1948-49, and they ended up not in this house. They hardly had any money at all, but regardless of how modest, actually modest is a very understated word for, we had no money when we were growing up. I was the eldest of 4 children, and my parents were really struggling financially. But no matter how difficult times were, every weekend they would open their modest living rooms to people who just loved chamber music, classical music. And they would sit around and just talk, no agenda. They would just talk about, oh, my son, he's thinking about going to be a violinist, but he can't make any money doing that, so I want him to go to business school, those kind of conversations. And then one thing led to another, and my my father, who always loved the violin, even when he was living in Xinhui, China, somebody gave him a violin and he loved playing it. When he got a little bit of money, he started buying violins. And how did he learn about violins and which ones to buy? The friends who came to his living room every weekend would tell him, "Oh, there's the structure of the bridge has an impact, and you have to make sure the sound post sits right. And oh, yes, Stradivari had two sons, and one of them liked to make big fat F holes, fatter than Antonio." Just sort of those kind of stories. And my father was just eager to learn all of that stuff. And so, fast forward, he passed away at the age of 65, just shy of 65.
So very, very young.
Very young. I'm already 2.5 years older than he was when he passed away. But by the time he passed away, he really only came into money maybe 8 years before he passed away. And he was on dialysis. I mean, but his love of the violin was just so strong that he basically ended up buying one violin after another, and he ended up with what the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which exhibited his instruments. He had a collection of 12 instruments, and they spanned the entire Cremonese violin making history, from Andrea Amati in early 1500s to Carlo Bergonzi in 17 to 1800, and everybody in between who was important. So in my father's, a Chinese immigrant to America, in his collection, the Museum of the Violin in Cremona saw the representation of the entire history of Cremonese violin making as well represented, both in beauty of to the eye and beauty to the ear in sound. So we actually brought 7 of my father's dozen instruments to Cremona, and they were on exhibit there in 2009, 2010. And one of them is still there at the Museum of the Violin. So I think, my father, he had 8 siblings, and his parents, I mean, very poor in China. Everybody looked to my father, who was number 6 out of 9 children, to help support the whole family. So he had to go to business school. Flavia, he had to go to business school. But wherever he could, he would try to listen to chamber music. He would practice. He would talk to people. And so I think it's just sort of in my DNA. I'm not a violinist. I tried to play piano. I did okay on piano, but I'm not a professional pianist. Long-winded story. My point is that it seems as though violin makers and violin music and audiences for violin, owners of the fine instruments, the creators of new instruments, that global community is bonded together by something that transcends oral language. People who don't read music can listen and pick it up by ear. I've seen remarkable things happen there. I've seen blind people learn music just from sound. And so there's something truly extraordinary, just so powerful, that ties us together globally. You don't have to be a woman, you don't have to be a man, you don't have to be old or young, Italian, Argentinian, Chinese, Korean, American, it doesn't matter. The music speaks for itself. And so I think it's a very compelling title that you picked. The subject is a compelling one, the death of a violin maker. Wow. Death of a violin maker. Think of all the people who have died in Odessa, and who knows how many more will die, how many violins were destroyed, how many cellos were destroyed in Ukraine. And it's there are a lot of instruments in the Far East. I think those are also now in the crosshairs because the Pacific Theater is coming up. And when I talk about these things, the hurt and the anger and the passion and the compassion for all of the work that goes into making these instruments and then bringing them to life by playing them and keeping them in playable condition. And now, Flavia, you have added the concept of story, the story of a violin maker. I just think it's so powerful. I'm so happy to meet you, and I'm hopeful that the story will will propagate around the world and cause people to think about what it takes to be a violin maker and the outcome, the consequences of the work that a maker produces in the actual work product itself, and how it outlives his or her life. It's a mortality. It's an immortality of the instruments. It's a mortality of the maker. Anyway, I've rambled on and on. Please, please respond, and then maybe Eloisa can also introduce herself and speak a little bit about the art of violin making and the.
Flavia has studied and find out something about the life of this violin maker, and she tried to, I think, suppose what was his real life, but she's an extra diegetic writer, okay, because she talks about Giuseppe out of the novel, and she tries to give us her personal version. So that's very nice. And there was a first version of the novel that I read, and I found very interesting. And the second one, which is the published one, is very, very, it's much more historical. And, I think that she underlined our, disease period with COVID, with, yes, because Giuseppe lived with the cholera.
I see.
Yes, cholera, and it was, the worst disease of that period. And we had COVID while Flavia was writing the death of a violin maker. So I think that she, Flavia, please tell me that I'm wrong. If you think that I'm wrong. And I think that Flavia underlined very much and very well the period of the disease, making, some comparing with the COVID disease, okay? The behavior of people who were crazy and who are crazy right now with the present disease. So I think that she has described very well the historical moment. She has described very well the technical, topic of a violin maker, even if Flavia is not a violin maker. So I think she has done a miracle.
I have not kept up with translation software. You wrote it in Italian. Have you tried running it through a basic translator like Google Translate for somebody in the English world to take and translate?
It's something that I want to do. Maybe I'm going to do it in the next month. And for sure, I want it to be translated in other languages. And I think English for sure. And then I think Chinese or Japanese, because I know that in Asian countries, and United States and some other countries of Europe, there is a good knowledge of violins and violin makers and people who love this world.
I would add Koreans.
Koreans.
Right. There are two kinds of Chinese. There is simplified Chinese and traditional Chinese. They're completely different. So you would need two different kinds of translators for Chinese. Then you'd need a Japanese translator and then a Korean translator. So you would need 4 different versions. But I agree. I think that's the market for your book. So very interesting challenge. And well, who knows? When we send this recording out, if anybody is listening to this recording and has any ideas about how best to go about translating into those, I believe those 4 languages are the target market for Flavia's work. And if you have any suggestions, I'm thinking about automation, but there may be people who would love the story and just want to just do it manually, and maybe some combination, some hybrid combination of both, because I want to get the story out there as soon as possible. I'd love to see it in a movie. I'd love to see it on stage. I know quite a few playwrights. I know people in the movie industry who are always looking for a good story. So I hope that we'll be able to take this recording and maybe even make it a shorter one.